The big meeting room on Nexus Prime Station was full of aliens. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their special chairs, breathing different air through masks and filters. The emergency session had been called because something bad had happened, something that scared even the most powerful species in the galaxy. Ambassador LateHFY stood up slowly. His crystal body changed colors from blue to deep red, which meant he was very worried. All the other aliens in the room knew this color pattern. When a Vorthon turned that red, it meant serious trouble. "Friends," LateHFY said through his translator device, "we need to talk about the humans from Earth." A few aliens made nervous sounds. Others shifted in their seats. Everyone had heard stories about humans, but most thought they were just rumors. 3 months ago, LateHFY continued, the Kethmoran raiders attacked what they thought was an easy target, a human colony ship called New Horizon. The ship had no weapons that our sensors could detect. It looked like any other civilian transport. Captain Tao. Jake Morrison had been having a normal day when the attack happened. He was drinking coffee in his captain's chair, watching the stars go by. The New Horizon carried 300 families looking for a new home on a planet called Haven's Rest. These people were farmers, teachers, engineers, and shop owners. They just wanted a peaceful life. But Jake Morrison was not just any ship captain. Before he started carrying colonists to new worlds, he had been a soldier. He had fought in wars that most civilians never heard about. When he retired from the military, he thought his fighting days were over. The ship's crew looked normal too. There was Betty Walsh, the chief engineer, who used to fix military ships during the border wars. There was Danny Cooper, the navigation officer, who had once guided attack ships through enemy space. There was Linda Hayes, the medical officer, who had saved soldiers' lives on a dozen battlefields. These people had all left the military to start new lives. They wanted to help families find new homes among the stars. They thought they were done with violence and death. They were wrong. The Kethmoran raiders were known throughout the galaxy as efficient killers. They attacked ships, took what they wanted, and left no witnesses. Their leader, War Chief Kraktar, had raided over 200 ships. He had never failed to take a target. When the Kethmoran ships appeared on the New Horizons sensors, Jake Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew what these aliens did to the people they captured. He looked around his bridge and saw the same understanding in his crew's eyes. "Battle stations," Jake said quietly. "Sir," said Danny Cooper, "we don't have any weapons." "We will," Jake replied. The Kethmoran attack began like always. Their ships surrounded the human vessel and demanded surrender. When Jake Morrison refused, they began cutting through the hull with their boarding pods. They expected to find scared civilians begging for their lives. Instead, they found hell. Betty Walsh had turned the engine room into a trap. She used spare parts and tools to make bombs. When the first Kethmoran warriors broke through, they walked into explosions that filled the corridors with fire and metal. Linda Hayes had converted the medical bay into a weapons factory. She used medical supplies to create poison gas and acid that could eat through alien armor. The Kethmoran who made it past Betty's traps found themselves choking and burning. Danny Cooper had taken apart the navigation computers and turned them into electronic weapons. He sent signals that hurt the aliens' sensitive ears and made their equipment stop working. But it was the colonists who really surprised the raiders. These farmers and teachers and shop owners fought like wild animals. They used kitchen knives, farming tools, and their bare hands. When a Kethmoran warrior expected to find a hiding family, he instead found people who attacked him without fear. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, most of the Kethmoran boarding party was dead. Their ships tried to retreat, but Jake Morrison had one more surprise. The colonists had been building a new life, and their cargo holds were full of industrial equipment, heavy machinery that could move mountains on their new world. Jake used that machinery like weapons. He launched mining explosives at the enemy ships. He used construction tools to grab and crush their engines. When the Kethmoran tried to run, they found that their ships wouldn't work. Only one alien survived. A young Kethmoran warrior named Sektal was found 3 days later, floating in an escape pod. When other aliens rescued him, he couldn't stop shaking. He kept saying the same words over and over. They don't stop fighting. Even when they're bleeding. Even when they're dying. They don't stop. Now, Ambassador LateHFY was telling this story to the Galactic Council. He showed them pictures of the Kethmoran ships. They were twisted pieces of metal, destroyed by people who were supposed to be helpless. This is not normal, LateHFY said. Other species surrender when they cannot win. Other species try to negotiate when they are outnumbered. Humans do not. They fight until they win or until they die. Sometimes they fight even after they should be dead. The room was very quiet. Some aliens were making their species equivalent of nervous laughter. Others were taking notes, probably thinking about their own military plans. We must warn everyone, LateHFY continued. Every pirate, every raider, every hostile force in known space needs to understand. Humans are dangerous. Not because they have the best weapons or the biggest ships. They are dangerous because they will pay any price to destroy their enemies. But the galaxy is huge, and news travels slowly. Some people would listen to the warning. Others would think it was just fear and rumors. War Chief Kraktar was still alive, somewhere in Kethmoran space. He was telling anyone who would listen to stay away from human ships. But there were others like him who had not learned this lesson yet. The warning had been given, but for many it was already too late. They just didn't know it yet. 3 months after the big meeting on Nexus Prime, Captain LateHFY was flying her cargo ship through space when she heard a call for help. The call came from Kepler 442b, a mining planet where humans had built a small colony. The message was simple but scary. This is Kepler colony calling any ship. We are under attack. The Draconian Syndicate has surrounded our planet. They want money we don't have. Please help us. Lisa looked at her crew on the bridge of their ship, the Starbound. There were 38 people on board, and most of them were not soldiers. They carried mining equipment and food to colonies like Kepler 442b. They were not supposed to fight wars, but LateHFY had been a soldier once. She had served in the Terran Defense Corps before she became a cargo ship captain. She knew what the Draconian Syndicate did to people who couldn't pay their demands. It was not pretty. What do you think, boss? Asked her first officer, Tony Martinez. He had been a military engineer before he joined Lisa's crew. We're not a warship. Lisa looked at the star map. Kepler 442b was only 2 days away. The colony had 800 people, including families with children. The Draconian Syndicate was known for selling people as slaves when they couldn't pay protection money. We're going to help them, Lisa said. Her crew didn't argue. Most of them had been soldiers too at some point. They understood that sometimes good people had to do dangerous things. The Draconian Syndicate had 3 warships around Kepler 442b. Their leader was Admiral Vex Thor, a lizard-like alien who had been raiding colonies for 20 years. He was smart and careful. He never attacked targets that could fight back effectively. When the Starbound appeared on his sensors, Admiral Vex Thor laughed. It was just 1 cargo ship against his 3 warships. He sent a message telling the humans to leave or be destroyed. LateHFY sent back a different message. This is Captain Hayes of the Starbound. You have 1 hour to leave this system. If you're still here after that, we will remove you. Admiral Vex Thor thought this was very funny. A cargo ship was threatening his battle fleet. He decided to teach these humans a lesson about respect. He was about to learn a different lesson. Lisa's crew spent the next hour turning their cargo into weapons. The Starbound was carrying mining equipment to the colony. Heavy drills that could cut through solid rock, explosives that could move mountains, industrial robots that could work in dangerous places. Betty Chen, the ship's engineer, took apart the mining drills and turned them into giant guns. The drills were designed to cut through the hardest materials so they could easily cut through ship armor. Carlos Rodriguez, who handled the ship's cargo, reprogrammed the industrial robots. Instead of mining rocks, they would now board enemy ships and destroy everything they found. Amy Foster, the ship's medic, used her knowledge of chemistry to turn mining explosives into guided missiles. She also prepared medical supplies that could be used as weapons if needed. The attack began when the hour was up. Admiral Vexthor expected the human ship to run away or surrender. Instead, the Starbound flew straight at his flagship. The Draconian ships opened fire, but the Starbound was not where they expected it to be. Lisa Hayes had learned military tactics during her service days. She used the planet's gravity and magnetic field to make her ship hard to hit. When the Starbound got close enough, it launched its improvised weapons. The converted mining drills cut through the flagship's armor like it was paper. The reprogrammed robots boarded the ship and began destroying engines and weapon systems. Admiral Vexthor had never seen anything like it. His advanced warship was being torn apart by mining equipment operated by cargo ship crew, but the humans were not done. The Starbound turned toward the second Draconian ship. This time, Amy Foster's explosive missiles hit the enemy ship's power core. The explosion was so big it could be seen from the planet's surface. The third Draconian ship tried to run away, but Carlos Rodriguez had planned for this. He had launched a cloud of mining robots into space around the planet. These robots grabbed onto the fleeing ship and began cutting it apart piece by piece. The battle was over in 4 hours. 3 Draconian warships had been destroyed by 1 cargo vessel. Admiral Vexthor was captured alive, though he spent the rest of his life telling other criminals to avoid human ships. But the Starbound was not the only human story that month. On Gamma Centauri, a farming colony was having a different kind of problem. The hegemony of Saurian worlds had decided that humans were not allowed to farm on that planet. They sent a fleet of enforcement ships to remove the colonists. The farmers had no military training. Their leader was Ben Carter, who had grown corn and wheat on Earth before moving to the frontier. The colonists had hunting rifles and farming tools, but no real weapons. The Saurians expected this to be easy. They would land, tell the humans to leave, and that would be the end of it. They had done this to weaker species many times before. They were wrong about humans being weak. Ben Carter called a meeting of all the farmers. There were 300 families spread across the continent-sized farming area. They grew food that fed a dozen other colonies. They want us to leave, Ben told the assembled farmers. They say this planet belongs to them now. What do we do? Asked Mary Johnson, who ran the largest vegetable farm. We stay, Ben said simply. This is our home. We built it with our own hands. We're not leaving. The farmers agreed. They had left Earth to build something new and good. They would not give it up without a fight. When the Saurian enforcement ships landed, they found that the humans had turned their entire world into a fortress. Farm equipment had been converted into weapons and vehicles. Irrigation systems had become communication networks. Grain silos had been turned into watchtowers and bunkers. Every field was a potential ambush site. Every barn held supplies for the resistance. Every farmhouse had become a small fort where families prepared to fight to the death. The Saurians had brought enough soldiers to handle a normal evacuation. They had not brought enough to fight an entire planet of determined humans. The siege lasted 4 months. Every day the Saurians tried to advance and take control of the farming areas. Every day, the humans pushed them back using tactics that made no sense to military experts. Steve Walsh used his harvesting machines like tanks, cutting through Saurian battle lines. Patricia Lee turned her greenhouse into a chemical weapons factory using plant fertilizers to make explosives. Gary Smith organized the other farmers into groups that attacked at night and disappeared into the fields during the day. The Saurians had better weapons and more training. But the humans had something else. They were fighting for their homes and families. They knew every hill, every valley, every hiding place on the planet. More importantly, they refused to give up. When Saurian officers tried to negotiate, the humans said the same thing every time. Leave our planet or we will bury you here. After 4 months, the Saurian commander requested permission to withdraw. His report to headquarters was simple. Cannot complete mission. Enemy casualties acceptable. Our casualties unacceptable. Recommend immediate evacuation. The Saurians left Gamma Centauri and never came back. Their military command issued a new order to all enforcement fleets. Human colonies are off limits until further notice. Word of these victories spread through the underground networks that connected pirates, raiders, and mercenaries across the galaxy. Some believed the stories. Others thought they were just rumors meant to scare criminals away from easy targets. But the smart criminals started looking for easier prey. There were plenty of other species to rob and threaten. Why take unnecessary risks with humans? The warnings were spreading, but slowly. Many hostile forces had not heard the stories yet. Others had heard them but didn't believe them. Those forces would learn soon enough. The galaxy was about to discover that crossing humanity always came with a price that was higher than anyone expected to pay. 6 months after the warnings began spreading through criminal networks, most pirates and raiders had heard stories about human resistance. Some believed the tales and stayed away from human targets. Others thought the stories were lies meant to protect weak colonies. The Crimson Tide Cartel was one of the groups that didn't believe the warnings. Their leader, Captain Rakesh, had been raiding ships and colonies for 15 years. He had attacked hundreds of targets and never met serious resistance from civilian populations. Humans are just another weak species, Rakesh told his crew. The stories about them are just fear and propaganda. We will prove this by taking their research station. The target was Alpha 7, a science station orbiting a gas giant in the Proxima system. The station had 53 people on board, all scientists and support staff. They were studying the strange atmospheric conditions of the gas giant below. Dr. Amy Rodriguez was the station commander. She was a xenobiologist who had spent her career studying alien life forms. She had never been in a fight in her life. The Crimson Tide expected her and her team to surrender immediately when faced with overwhelming force. The pirates brought 5 ships against 1 research station. It should have been easy. It was not easy. When the Crimson Tide ships approached Alpha 7, Dr. Rodriguez called an emergency meeting of all station personnel. Scientists, technicians, maintenance workers, and even the cook gathered in the main laboratory. "Pirates are coming," Amy said simply. "They want to capture us and probably sell us as slaves. We have 2 choices, surrender or fight." "We're not soldiers," said Dr. Kevin Barnes, the atmospheric physicist. "We don't know how to fight." "No," Amy agreed, "but we know how to think. And thinking is how humans win fights." The station had no weapons, but it had something else. The most advanced atmospheric research equipment in known space. Amy and her team had been studying gases that could dissolve metal, create explosions, or poison air supplies. They had been using these gases to understand how planets formed. Now they would use them for a different purpose. Dr. Ellen Price, the station's chemist, began mixing compounds that would turn the station's air system into a weapon. Dr. Kevin Barnes reprogrammed the atmospheric processors to create pressure bombs. Dr. Nancy Cooper, who studied gas giant weather patterns, figured out how to use the station's position to pull dangerous materials from the planet below. When the Crimson Tide boarding parties cut through the station's hull, they expected to find scared scientists hiding in laboratories. Instead, they found a maze of chemical traps and atmospheric weapons. The first boarding pod broke through the docking bay and released 20 armed pirates. They immediately started choking on gas that Dr. Price had pumped into the air system. The gas didn't just make them sick, it made their equipment stop working and their weapons jam. The second boarding pod tried to enter through the main laboratory. Dr. Barnes had turned the lab into a pressure trap. When the pirates broke through the sudden change in air pressure threw them against the walls hard enough to break bones. The third boarding pod found Dr. Cooper waiting for them with a weapon that shouldn't have existed. She had modified a research drone to carry concentrated acid from the gas giant's atmosphere. The acid could eat through anything, including pirate armor and the pirates inside it. But the real surprise came when the pirates realized that every human on the station was fighting. The cook, Maria Santos, had turned the kitchen into a weapons factory using food preparation equipment. The maintenance chief, Bob Fletcher, had rigged the station's power systems to electrocute anyone who touched the wrong surfaces. Even the graduate students were dangerous. Jenny Walsh, who was working on her doctoral thesis, had turned her research project into a guided missile system. Her thesis was about how gases moved in zero gravity. Now she was using that knowledge to direct clouds of poison at the invaders. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Crimson Tide cartel had lost their flagship and most of their fleet to a research station that wasn't supposed to have any defenses. Captain Rakesh was found floating in space, his escape pod's life support failing. When other pirates rescued him, he could only repeat one phrase. They turned science into death. Everything they knew, they used to kill us. The surviving Crimson Tide members spread the word through every criminal network in known space. Human targets were off limits. The price was too high. But an even more disturbing report came from the edge of known space, where Captain Ryan Foster was exploring new star systems. His ship, Deep Space Nine, was investigating strange energy readings when they found something that made no sense. A Catamaran dreadnought was drifting dead in space. The massive warship was over 1 kilometer long and normally carried a crew of more than 1,000 warriors. It was designed to destroy entire fleets. Now it was a tomb. Ryan Foster and his exploration team boarded the alien ship to investigate. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about space combat. The dreadnought's crew was dead, but not from weapons fire or explosions. They had died from what looked like pure terror. Some had tried to hide in sealed chambers. Others had apparently died while running away from something. The ship's security recordings told an impossible story. A single human boarding party had attacked the dreadnought. 12 Marines led by Commander Kate Sullivan had somehow gotten aboard the alien vessel and fought their way through over 1,000 defenders. But they hadn't just won the fight. They had done something worse. They had made the alien warriors afraid to fight. The recordings showed Commander Sullivan and her squad moving through the ship with systematic precision. They didn't just kill the aliens they encountered. They did it in ways that terrified the survivors. They used the aliens' own weapons against them. They turned the ship's systems into traps. They made every corridor a hunting ground. Most disturbing of all, they had somehow communicated with the alien crew. Not in words, but in actions. Every move they made sent a clear message. Resistance was hopeless, surrender was not acceptable, and death was the only outcome. The final recording from the Catamaran captain, made just before his ship's systems failed, would become legendary among those who traded in warnings about humans. His translated words were simple but chilling. They do not fight like soldiers. They do not fight like warriors. They fight like death itself has chosen their side. We are the strongest military force in our sector, and we are helpless against 12 humans who refuse to die. Ryan Foster's report reached military headquarters on dozens of worlds. The message was always the same. Humans represented something new and dangerous in galactic warfare. Not because they had better technology or superior numbers, but because they approached combat with a psychological framework that other species couldn't understand or counter. The hegemony of Saurian worlds, whose military had retreated from Gamma Centauri, issued a new training manual for their forces. The manual had one simple rule. If enemy forces include humans, request immediate reinforcement or withdrawal authorization. Standard combat doctrine does not apply. The Altarian Republic, masters of 3-star systems, quietly began developing new military strategies based on avoiding human contact entirely. Their war games consistently showed that while victory against humans was technically possible, the cost would leave them vulnerable to every other threat in the galaxy. Even the Galactic Trade Federation began changing their shipping routes to avoid areas where human-pirate conflicts had occurred. Insurance companies started offering discounts to ships that stayed away from human space, not because humans were dangerous to civilians, but because the areas around human colonies had become too dangerous for pirates, which meant unexpected battles and damaged cargo. The warnings that had started with Ambassador Zethkri's speech were no longer just words. They were backed by evidence that even the most skeptical military minds couldn't ignore. But evidence and warnings were not enough to stop every threat. Somewhere in the galaxy, forces were already in motion that would test whether humanity's reputation was deserved. The hegemony of the Iron Stars, masters of 100 conquered worlds, had been watching and planning. They had heard the warnings and studied the reports. They had reached a different conclusion than everyone else. They believed that humans could be defeated, but only with overwhelming force applied quickly and decisively. They were assembling the largest invasion fleet in recorded galactic history. Their target was Earth itself, The reports could no longer be ignored or dismissed as rumors. In government buildings and military headquarters across dozens of star systems, leaders found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Humanity represented something entirely new. In galactic politics, General Marcus Webb commanded the Terran Defense Corps' 7th Fleet from his flagship, the battleship Constitution. He had spent 30 years protecting human colonies and trade routes. Now he found himself in a situation no military commander had ever experienced. Governments that had never acknowledged human sovereignty were requesting formal diplomatic contact, not to negotiate trade agreements or territorial disputes, but to establish what they carefully called mutual non-engagement protocols. The first to arrive was Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Republic. The Altarians had dominated 3 star sectors for over 2 centuries with military doctrine that emphasized overwhelming force and quick victories. Their ships were among the most advanced in the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar met General Webb in the Constitution's main conference room. The alien's forearms moved in patterns that indicated extreme nervousness. "General Webb," Veltar said through his translator, "my government wishes to discuss the establishment of formal boundaries between our territories and yours." "We already have established boundaries," Webb replied. "They were set by the Galactic Territorial Accords." "Yes," Veltar agreed, "but my government would like to discuss additional buffer zones, areas where our forces would not operate, to avoid any potential misunderstandings." Webb understood what the alien was really asking for. The Altarians wanted humans to promise not to fight them, because their own military analysis had concluded that victory against humans would cost more than any possible benefit. Similar meetings were taking place across human space. Dr. Helen Martinez, humanity's chief xenopsychologist, found herself briefing the Terran Council on reports that seemed almost absurd. The Vex Consortium has relocated their entire piracy operation to avoid human trade routes, she told the assembled politicians and military leaders. The Red Talon Mercenary Company has added clauses to all their contracts stating they will not accept missions involving human targets. 3 separate criminal organizations have disbanded rather than risk encountering human resistance. But the most significant change was in military doctrine across the galaxy. Species that had fought each other for centuries were beginning to cooperate, not in alliance against humanity, but in agreement that humans represented a threat unlike anything they had encountered before. The turning point came when the Galactic Consortium of Trade Routes issued Navigation Advisory 7741. The advisory was distributed to every civilian ship, cargo hauler, and passenger transport in known space. Warning to all civilian and commercial traffic. Human-controlled space should be considered a non-standard navigation zone. Standard rules of engagement, surrender protocols, and conflict resolution procedures may not apply when dealing with human vessels or installations. Extreme caution advised. Recommend avoiding human space unless essential for mission completion. It was the first time in galactic history that an entire species had been classified as a navigation hazard. Captain Paula Henderson was commanding a routine patrol mission along the border between human and Kethmoran space, when she received an unusual message. A Kethmoran battlecruiser was requesting permission to enter human territory. This had never happened before. The Kethmoran were proud warriors who considered asking permission a sign of weakness. But the message from War Commander Vekthul was clear. "Human patrol vessel, this is Kethmoran cruiser Stormclaw, requesting safe passage through your space. We have wounded aboard, and your territory offers the shortest route to our medical facilities." Paula granted the request, but she was curious. When the Kethmoran ship passed through her patrol area, she opened a communication channel. "War Commander," she said, "may I ask why you requested permission? Your people usually just go where you want to go." Vekthul's reply was honest and disturbing. "Because we have learned that fighting humans is not profitable. We would rather ask permission than give you a reason to board our ship." This conversation was recorded and sent to Terran Defense Headquarters. It represented something unprecedented. A species known for their aggressive nature was actively avoiding conflict with humans out of pure practicality. But not everyone in the galaxy was convinced that humanity's reputation was deserved. The hegemony of the Iron Stars had been observing human activities for months, studying every battle report and analyzing every victory. Their conclusion was different from everyone else's. Emperor Krexthor believed that humans could be defeated, but only with sufficient force applied quickly and decisively. He had authorized the construction of the largest invasion fleet in recorded galactic history. The Iron Stars fleet was assembling in secret at the edge of their territory, 3,000 warships, including their most advanced dreadnoughts and battle carriers. The fleet represented the combined military might of 100 conquered worlds. Admiral LateHFY commanded the invasion force. He had studied human tactics extensively and believed he understood their weaknesses. Humans fought with determination and creativity, but they were still limited by physics and mathematics. Enough ships with enough firepower would overwhelm any defense. Humans rely on fear and reputation, Admiral LateHFY told his subordinates during their final planning session. Once we demonstrate that they can be defeated decisively, their psychological advantage will disappear. Other species will see that humans are not invincible. But while the Iron Stars prepared their invasion, the human military was not idle. General Webb and his colleagues had been monitoring the buildup of hostile forces. They knew an attack was coming, and they had been preparing for it. The difference was in how they prepared. Other species would have built more ships and recruited more soldiers. Humans did something else entirely. Every human colony, research station, and commercial vessel received the same set of orders. In the event of major military action against Earth, all human assets are to provide maximum support to the defense effort. This includes civilian vessels, research equipment, industrial facilities, and personnel. Dr. Lisa Chen was working at the Jupiter Research Station when the orders arrived. She was a civilian scientist studying the gas giant's atmospheric dynamics. The orders meant that her research station would become part of the military defense network if Earth was attacked. "Are we going to fight?" asked her assistant, Dr. Kevin Parker. "If we have to," Lisa replied. "But more importantly, we're going to make sure that anyone who attacks Earth pays a price that the galaxy will never forget." Similar conversations were happening across human space. Cargo ship Captain Tony Rodriguez received orders to prepare his vessel for potential military support duties. Mining foreman Sandra Walsh was told to ready her asteroid mining operation for alternative applications. Even civilian transport pilot Gary Johnson was briefed on how his passenger ship could be used to support military operations. The galaxy had learned to fear human military forces, but it was about to discover that the distinction between human, military, and civilian populations was not as clear as other species assumed. Captain Diana Foster was commanding a routine exploration mission when she intercepted Iron Star's communications. The enemy fleet was moving toward human space, and their target was clear: Earth itself. Diana sent an immediate warning to Terran Defense Headquarters, but she also sent a different message to every human ship, station, and colony in her communication. "Farsia, they're coming for our home." Everyone knows what that means. The response was immediate and universal. Human vessels throughout the galaxy began changing course toward Earth. Not just military ships, but cargo haulers, research vessels, mining ships, and even civilian transports. They came carrying whatever they could contribute to the defense effort. The Iron Star's invasion fleet was expecting to face the official human military forces. They had calculated their chances against the Terran Defense Corps and concluded that victory was possible with acceptable losses. They had not calculated what would happen when they faced an entire species that considered Earth's survival more important than their own. The final preparations were complete. Admiral LateHFY's invasion fleet began its approach to the Sol system, confident that overwhelming force would succeed where smaller attacks had failed. They were about to learn why every other hostile force in the galaxy had decided that crossing humanity was a mistake, too expensive to make. Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the bridge of the battleship Liberty, watching the biggest enemy fleet in galactic history approach Earth's solar system. 3,000 warships bearing the insignia of the Iron Star's hegemony moved in perfect formation. Their commanders believed that overwhelming force would succeed where smaller attacks had failed. They were wrong about everything. Admiral LateHFY led the Iron Star's fleet from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Dominator. He had studied every human battle, analyzed every victory, and planned for every possible defense strategy. He was confident that 3,000 ships could defeat anything the humans could deploy. "Begin the attack," he ordered as his fleet entered the outer solar system. "Target all military installations first, then move on the planet itself." What happened next changed galactic warfare forever. The first sign that something was wrong came when the asteroid belt began shooting at them. What the Iron Stars had assumed were mining operations revealed themselves as hidden weapons platforms. Hundreds of asteroids that should have been empty rocks suddenly blazed with weapons fire. Commander Steve Parker led Mining Station Alpha 7, which had been disguised as a simple asteroid processing facility. In reality, his miners had spent months converting their industrial equipment into weapons. Rock cutters became particle beam weapons. Ore haulers became missile platforms. Processing facilities became ammunition factories. "Light them up," Steve ordered, and dozens of hidden installations throughout the asteroid belt opened fire simultaneously. But the asteroids were just the beginning. As the Iron Stars fleet moved deeper into the system, they encountered something unprecedented: an entire star system that had been converted into a weapon. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the cargo ship New Frontier, which had been carrying mining equipment to the outer colonies when the attack began. Now her ship was part of a fleet of civilian vessels that had revealed their true purpose. The cargo holds that should have contained trade goods instead held military-grade weapons and ammunition. The passenger compartments had been converted to house soldiers. The ship's crew included not just merchants and transport workers, but former military personnel who had been living normal lives until their home was threatened. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole," came the broadcast from the Liberty. "Execute Plan Omega." Plan Omega was something no other species had ever attempted: the complete militarization of an entire star system's civilian population and infrastructure. The research stations orbiting Jupiter unleashed experimental weapons that violated every known convention of galactic warfare. Dr. Sandra Martinez had been studying high-energy physics when the invasion began. Now her research equipment was being used to create weapons that could destroy ships from impossible distances. "Fire the gravity disruptor," Sandra ordered her team of scientists turned weapons operators. The device had been designed to study gravitational effects around gas giants. Now it was creating gravitational anomalies that crushed enemy ships like empty cans. But the true horror for the Iron Stars fleet came when they realized that every human in the system had received the same standing order: if Earth falls, make the enemy pay such a price that no one will ever threaten humanity again. The battle was not just military against military. It was an entire species against an invasion force, and the humans had decided that their own survival was negotiable, as long as their enemy's destruction was guaranteed. Commander Mike Rodriguez led a squadron of converted transport ships against the Iron Stars battle line. His vessels had been designed to carry passengers between planets. Now they carried boarding parties that fought with a brutality that paralyzed the enemy. "Remember," Mike told his boarding teams as they prepared to assault an Iron Stars cruiser, "we're not trying to capture their ship. We're trying to make sure they never want to attack another human target." The boarding action that followed became legendary among military historians. The human assault teams didn't just win. They did it in ways that left the surviving Iron Stars crew psychologically broken. They used the aliens' own ship systems against them. They turned every corridor into a killing ground. They made surrender impossible and resistance futile. Admiral Nexvar watched his mighty fleet being torn apart by forces that shouldn't have existed. Civilian cargo ships were destroying his battlecruisers. Research stations were using scientific equipment as weapons of mass destruction. Even the humans' children seemed to be involved in the defense effort, operating communication networks and supply lines with military precision. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "These are supposed to be civilians, merchants, scientists." "Sir," replied his chief analyst, "I don't think humans make the same distinction between military and civilian that we do. When their home is threatened, everyone becomes a soldier." The battle lasted 6 days. When it ended, fewer than 200 Iron Stars vessels were still capable of movement. Most of those were so damaged that they barely qualified as functional spacecraft. Admiral Nexvar himself was captured when his flagship was boarded by a team led by Captain Nancy Thompson, a former passenger transport pilot who had volunteered for the most dangerous assault missions. The capture was broadcast throughout the galaxy, showing the commander of the largest invasion fleet in history surrendering to a woman whose day job was flying tourists between vacation planets. But the real message came in what happened to the surviving Iron Star's forces. They were not killed or imprisoned. Instead, they were sent home with a recording of the battle and a simple message. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them what it costs to threaten humanity. The survivors carried more than just a message. They carried trauma that would affect Iron Star's military doctrine for generations. Officers who had been considered brave and competent were reduced to nervous wrecks who refused to discuss human combat capabilities. War Commander Kex Thule, one of the few Iron Star's officers to escape the Sol system, filed a report that became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. Recommendation for immediate cessation of all hostile activities directed toward human-controlled space or assets. Human military doctrine appears to operate on the principle that acceptable losses include total casualties, as long as enemy forces suffer greater losses. Standard risk-benefit analysis cannot be applied to conflicts involving human forces. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy finally understood what the warnings had been trying to say. Humans didn't fight to win in the traditional sense. They fought to make sure that losing was unthinkable for everyone involved. The political consequences were immediate and far-reaching. The Iron Star's hegemony, which had controlled 100 worlds for centuries, collapsed within months. Not because they had been militarily defeated, but because their subject species saw what had happened at Earth and decided that rebellion was suddenly possible. Other galactic powers began restructuring their military doctrines to avoid any possibility of conflict with human forces. The Kethmoran Empire issued new standing orders. Human targets are forbidden. Any commander who engages human forces without direct authorization from the High Command will be court-martialed. The Altarian Republic went further, establishing a formal non-aggression treaty with humanity that included provisions for mutual assistance against common threats. They had concluded that having humans as allies was preferable to having them as enemies. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy perceived warfare itself. The concept of acceptable losses had been redefined by a species that treated their own lives as expendable resources in service of larger goals. Dr. Patricia Foster, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic officer, found herself briefing alien ambassadors on human military philosophy. The conversations were always uncomfortable. You have to understand, she told a delegation from the Centauri Trade Federation, we don't see war as a political tool or an economic strategy. We see it as a survival mechanism. When we fight, we're not trying to gain advantage or territory. We're trying to ensure that attacking us becomes so costly that no one will ever want to try it again. The delegation's response was typical. They requested immediate expansion of their non-aggression agreements with humanity. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, a new phrase had entered common usage across dozens of languages and cultures. Translated into Standard Galactic, it read, "They warned the galaxy, don't cross humanity, but it was already too late." The warnings had been given, starting with Ambassador Zethkree's speech to the Galactic Council. Examples had been made, from the New Horizon incident to the destruction of the Iron Star's invasion fleet. The price had been paid in blood and broken fleets scattered across dozens of star systems. Humanity had earned something unprecedented in galactic history, the right to be left alone. Not through diplomacy or superior technology, but through the simple demonstration that any victory against them would cost more than any rational species was willing to pay. Captain Lisa Hayes, now commanding a new ship called the Peacekeeper, received a routine message from Galactic Traffic Control as she prepared to leave Earth orbit. The message was addressed to all ships in human space.